1957. The smiling young woman pouring your coffee at 30,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean had been trained to do something almost no passenger ever suspected. If that aircraft went down on the open water, in the dark, hundreds of miles from any shore, she was the one who was going to get you out of it alive. Her name was Lois. She was 24 years old, a stewardess for Pan American World Airways, working the long run from San Francisco to Honolulu aboard a Boeing Stratocruiser, the great double-decked airliner with a spiral staircase winding down to a lounge in its belly. Clipped inside the life vest she stowed on every single flight was a small metal whistle. She had carried that whistle for 2 years and never once had cause to blow it. She was trained for the night she might. These are 20 things a 1950s stewardess was trained to do when everything went wrong, the parts of the job the glossy advertisements never showed you. The world looked at her and saw a pretty girl with a coffee pot. The airline had built her into something else entirely. The truth, underneath the lipstick and the tailored suit, was simple. She was trained for this. Number 11 is the problem that has killed people in real evacuations. The one she was drilled to overcome. Number 1 is not a procedure at all, and it is the bravest thing on this entire list. Now, before we go further, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Number 20. She knew the aircraft itself. People imagine her training was all lipstick and posture. In truth, a recruit was quizzed on the workings of the machine she flew in, on brake spoilers, vortex generators, and ailerons, on how the great aircraft actually stayed in the sky. She was not a decoration who happened to be aboard. She was a working member of a crew who understood, at least in the essentials, the flying machine her passengers had trusted their lives to. That knowledge was the foundation everything else was built on, because she was trained for this. Number 19, the pre-flight safety check. Before a single passenger stepped aboard, the stewardess walked the cabin on a careful inspection. Every piece of emergency equipment in its place, the exits clear and functional, the life vests stowed where they belonged, the first aid supplies stocked, the extinguishers secured. She knew where every safety device on that aircraft lived and how every one of them worked, because in an emergency, there would be no time to go looking. The calm of the cabin began with a quiet, methodical check that the passengers never saw. Number 18, the mock cabin. At the Pan American World Airways Training School in Miami, Florida, the recruits did not learn emergencies from a book alone. The airline built a full mock cabin and galley, a complete aircraft interior on the ground, and the women drilled in it by the hour, where every door was, how every latch released, how the cabin would feel and sound when it all went wrong. By the time a woman first faced a real emergency aboard a real aircraft, her hands already knew the motions because she had performed them 100 times in a perfect copy. She was trained for this. Number 17, the life vest. She could find a life vest in the dark, pull it over her head, and secure it in seconds. And more importantly, she could teach a cabin full of frightened strangers to do the same in the few minutes before an ocean landing. The demonstration that modern travelers tune out, the vest, the straps, the whistle, the little light, was not a formality to her. It was a survival briefing she could deliver with total calm while her own heart was pounding, because a panicked instructor makes a panicked cabin. Number 16. The life raft. This is the one that should change how you see her forever. At the Miami school, stewardesses were given classroom and hands-on instruction in emergency lifeboat procedures. She was trained to get a life raft out of its stowage, deploy it, inflate it, and load terrified passengers into it on the heaving surface of the open sea. The smiling girl from the advertisement had been taught to run a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. She was trained for exactly the nightmare that everyone aboard was praying would never come. Number 15. The ditching. A planned water landing, which the airlines called a ditching, had its own detailed procedure, and she knew her part of it cold. Bracing the passengers, positioning them, preparing the cabin for an impact that, she was taught, would very likely come as more than one jolt, because an aircraft striking water often strikes more than once. She knew not to open a door until the aircraft had come to a complete stop, and she knew the order of operations that gave a cabin its best chance. Over an ocean, the difference between a tragedy and a survival was very often the training of the woman in the aisle. Number 14. Fire. A fire in a sealed metal tube in the sky is among the most terrifying things that can happen in aviation, and the stewardess was trained to fight it, to find the source, to choose the right extinguisher, to fight a fire in flight with the few tools aboard and nowhere to escape to. She stood between a cabin full of people and a fire that could take the aircraft, and she had been drilled in exactly what to do. She was trained for this too. Number 13. The loss of cabin pressure. At the altitudes the new airliners flew, a sudden loss of cabin pressure could rob everyone aboard of useful consciousness in a frighteningly short time. The stewardess was taught about decompression, about oxygen, about getting air to her passengers and to herself before the thin air at altitude could do its damage. She understood a danger that was invisible, silent, and fast, and she knew the handful of actions that stood between a cabin and disaster when the air itself gave out. Number 12. The medical emergency. Far from any hospital, hours from any doctor, a passenger taken gravely ill at 30,000 feet had exactly one trained person to turn to, and she was wearing white gloves. The stewardess carried real first aid training: a heart attack, a difficult birth, a seizure, a man who simply collapsed in the aisle. She was the entire medical response for a small town's worth of people suspended above an ocean, and she met that responsibility with what she had been taught and what she carried in the kit. She was trained for this. Number 11. The panic. Here is the problem that has killed people in real evacuations, again and again, right up to the present day. Passengers panic. They freeze in their seats. They stop to drag luggage from the overhead bins, blocking the path of everyone behind them, in defiance of every rule. They push toward a blocked exit instead of an open one. The stewardess was trained to manage exactly this, to command a frightened crowd with a voice that left no room for argument. to keep the human stampede from becoming the thing that killed everyone. Crowd control in a life or death moment was a skill, and she had it. Number 10. The evacuation itself. When an aircraft had to be emptied fast, the stewardess ran the evacuation by a drilled choreography. The commands were shouted in a clear, carrying voice, which exits to use and which to abandon. The flow of bodies kept moving, so the cabin emptied in the shortest possible time. Because in a fire or a sinking, time was the only thing that mattered. Every passenger who walked away owed that orderly, drilled, practice flow to the woman who had rehearsed it until it was instinct. Number 9. The voice that did not break. Through all of it, the fire and the panic and the ocean, the stewardess was trained to keep her voice level, calm, and warm. A trained calm in the aisle is contagious, just as panic is. The single most powerful tool she carried into an emergency was not in the kit. It was the steadiness in her own voice, the refusal to let the cabin hear her fear, the composure that told 200 frightened people that someone aboard was in control. She had been trained until that calm held, even when everything else did not. I have to step out of the story for a moment, because this is the thing that changed how I see these women. We remember them as the glamorous faces of a glamorous age. Almost no one remembers that we trained an entire generation of young women to run lifeboats and fight fires and lead strangers out of sinking aircraft, and then dress them in white gloves so we would underestimate them. Now, back to the cabin. Number 8. What the training was for. On the 16th of October, 1956, a Pan American World Airways Stratocruiser, on that very same run across the Pacific toward Hawaii, lost 2 of its engines over the open ocean in the dark. The aircraft could not stay in the air. The crew ditched it in the sea near a Coast Guard cutter that had been guiding them, and every single one of the 31 people aboard survived. They survived because a flight crew and a cabin crew did, in reality, exactly what they had been trained to do. The lifeboat drills were not theater. That night, they were the reason 31 people went home. Number 7. The danger was real. Make no mistake about how dangerous this era of flying truly was. The beautiful Stratocruiser had a troubled record, and Pan American World Airways alone lost 7 of them across the 1950s, with another lost off the Oregon coast in a ditching in 1955. These were not abstract risks. The ocean was real, the failures were real, and the lives in the cabin were real. The training was deadly serious, precisely because the danger was. And the women who did this job boarded every flight knowing it. Number 6. Composure as the product. A real Pan American World Airways stewardess of the era, named Joanne Flynn, described the standard they were held to. They were trained, she said, to handle everything, from emergencies in the air to unruly passengers, all without rumpling their uniforms or mussing their hair. Read that again. The expectation was not merely to survive an emergency, but to manage it so smoothly, so calmly, that grace itself never cracked. That composure was the entire product the training was designed to build. Number 5. She was a first responder. Strip away the glamour and the truth is plain. The cabin crew were the first responders of the sky. The people on the scene when the worst happened, long before any help could arrive. There was no one else coming for those minutes that decided everything. There was her. The training existed because, in the moment of crisis, the lives of everyone aboard rested in the hands of the young women walking the aisle, and the airline knew it even as its advertisements pretended otherwise. Number 4. The mask of glamour. So, why did the world only ever see the coffee and the smile? Because that was what the airlines were selling. Air travel was marketed as effortless luxury and a cabin full of reminders that you were hurtling over a freezing ocean in a machine that could fail would not sell tickets. So the training was hidden behind the glamour, deliberately. And the most capable person on the aircraft was dressed and presented as the most decorative. The smile was real. The lifeboat training underneath it was just as real and far less convenient to advertise. Number 3. They raised the odds for everyone. Every drill, every procedure, every hard lesson learned from a real ditching fed back into a system that made flying safer for all of us. The survival rates in aviation rose over these decades, in part because of the trained professionals in the cabin, and because the industry learned, crash by crash, what training saved lives. The women in the aisle were part of how air travel became, in time, one of the safest ways a human being can move across the earth. Number 2. She was the last one out. Here is the rule that tells you everything about the job. In an evacuation, the cabin crew did not save themselves first. They got the passengers out and they stayed until the cabin was clear. And only then, if there was still time, did they leave. She was trained to put every frightened stranger ahead of herself, to be the last body moving toward the exit of a sinking or burning aircraft. The duty ran in exactly the opposite direction from instinct, and she had been trained until the duty won. Number 1. Not a procedure at all. The courage to stay calm and stay last. After the rafts and the extinguishers and the drills, the thing that truly defined her cannot be found in any manual. It was the willingness, when her own life was on the line, to hold her voice steady, to think of the cabin before herself, and to be the last one out the door. That is not a skill. That is courage, trained and ready, and waiting quietly behind a warm smile and a pot of coffee. Lois carried that whistle for years and never had to blow it. The point was never whether she would need it. The point was that if the night ever came, she was ready. And the 200 strangers in her care would never know how frightened she might have been, because she was trained for this. And she would have been the last one out. 20 things. Not one of them matched the picture on the advertisement. A young woman taught to run a lifeboat, fight a fire, deliver first aid over an ocean, command a panicked crowd, and walk out last, all while keeping a voice so calm that the cabin around her stayed calm too. We dressed her in white gloves and let the whole world believe she was there to pour the coffee. She let us believe it. And every time one of those beautiful, troubled airliners came down on the water, and the people aboard climbed into the rafts and lived, it was because the smiling girl from the poster had been, all along, exactly what the poster never said. She was trained for this. And somewhere right now, a granddaughter watches an old film of a stewardess from 1957, gliding down the aisle of a strata cruiser with a tray held perfectly level, and says she was just there to look pretty and pour the coffee. An old woman in the next chair, with a small, tarnished whistle in a drawer in her bedroom, does not argue. She simply remembers the lifeboat drills and the fire she once helped put out over the Atlantic, and a night near Hawaii when a sister crew brought 31 souls home to the sea's edge and out alive. She smiles to herself because she knows what those white gloves were really hiding, even if the whole world chose to see only the coffee. Thank you so much for watching. If this changed the way you see these women, give it a like and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from and whether anyone in your family wore those wings. If you want more forgotten history of the generations who came before us, please subscribe. It truly helps the channel. The next story is waiting for you right now.